People have asked me the same question since it happened. What caused the downfall of the sport? Are all the rumors true? Were you the first? To that I say, who cares? I know what happened. It was a lifestyle and some people got caught up in an ugly mess. I think it's still too soon, but the truth will come out eventually. So I'm not worried. It's just a matter of if they'll believe me or not. Their choice.
So let's get started. Can you state your name, please?
Ronnie Van Cosworth.
Clarence Thompson.
Bernard Henderson.
Edward Davis.
It was great coaching Eddie. I found him. He was my prodigy. To this day, I'll say he's the greatest Tic Tac Toe player I've ever seen. I saw a lot of myself in Eddie, and I tried to instill all the lessons that I learned throughout my career in him. It was almost like seeing myself play.
Back in the late 80s and early 90s, Ronnie Van Cosworth was the greatest thing in the world, the master of the sport. Until 1993, I was sitting right there, in my notes, calling play-by-play for the most viewed match ever recorded, Van Cosworth versus Hawk. It started off great, but I just can't believe the way it ended.
It's just one of those unlucky situations. As I went to put the X on the board, a pain started in my hand. I broke my wrist in 9 places. That injury ruined my career. Even through training and physical therapy, I just could never get back to where I was.
I met Ronnie about a year before I turned pro, so around October 2001. I was at an amateur match, and I won. He was the guest judge, and he handed me the trophy after I won. Like, oh my God, Ronnie Van Cosworth, right? An idol of mine. From that moment on, it was just an instant connection.
The first time I ever saw him play was so eye-opening for me. It was an exhibition match at a rec center. He was great. He was really great, like nothing I had ever seen before in someone his age. But there was still some things he needed to learn naturally. He needed a coach. And so, he was pretty much on his own before I came along.
I think for Eddie, Ronnie coming into his life was a great thing for his career. As much as it was my job to take care of things, the fact that Ronnie was involved really gave Ed the opportunity to shine. It brought so many connections for us, which eventually helped him get to the pros.
At the time, the league was struggling. The late 90s was tough. So when my friend, the legend Ronnie Van Cosworth, called me up and told me about this kid he was training, I knew this was a look in the right direction, especially for such a widespread sport like Tic Tac Toe. I felt that Eddie was an opportunity to help us get back to the top.
The training was brutal. Well, being a rookie at least, but eventually I got the hang of it. Ron was big on the mental side of the sport, not letting things get in my head and mess me up. All I really wanted was to learn the fork. The greatest, trickiest move ever. Yeah, Ronnie created it. I wanted to learn it from the best. I've already mastered every single move, but he wouldn't teach it to me because he said I wasn't ready. But I was.
Was Eddie ready to learn the fork? That can be up for discussion and for debate. But, even for me, the guy who invented it, it took me time to learn, and so I wanted to make sure that he was prepared first.
In the 1980s, tic-tac-toe wasn't really considered to be one mainstream sport. That is, people would know it existed from kiddie menus, however, they wouldn't really consider it to be a major sport until, that is, the late Ronnie Van Cosworth came along, and he revolutionized the sport with the strategy known as the fork. You see, the fork is a strategy that allows the player to have 2 opportunities where they can win, and this allowed them to be able to completely change the game, and it really put Tic Tac Toe on the map. It's a fairly complicated strategy that honestly takes all of my expertise and years of learning in order to be able to understand, but I'll try to explain it in simple terms. Essentially, the fork is a move that allows a player to have like two ways of winning at the same time. Its most common form would be something along the lines of like an N or a V that allows the player to win in two ways diagonally. However, there are other variations of it, commonly known as like the R and the reverse R, and there's a couple other variations to it that are really more complicated that I don't think you would be able to understand, because like I said, it takes somebody years to understand the sport altogether. But long story short, this was a move that really only Ronnie understood up until the late 2000s, early 2010s, where people really began to understand the scope of how the strategy worked and how it applies to the game of tic-tac-toe.
I knew I was the best. So did Ron and Clarence. People started to hear talk about a new kid who was taught the fork by the greatest player ever. And they got scared. And to think I wasn't even at my full potential yet.
When Eddie came into the league, I was already a few years into the pros lifestyle, just coming off a national championship. So, was I really scared of Eddie? No, I wasn't really scared of anyone, for that matter. Because in my eyes, I didn't think there was anyone who could beat me. Simple as that.
I knew who Bernard was. Was he as good as everyone thought? No. My first match in the league was against him. The guy in his prime versus the rookie. They probably thought, oh, let's put Henderson up against this guy because it'll make him look good to start off the season with a win. I whooped his ass. In the only way I knew how. The fork.
The first match between Henderson and Davis, in my opinion, has to be the best in history, if not one of the best. Nothing can top it. Luckily, I got the chance to see Davis work out a few times and show off in preseason matchups. Oh my goodness. But yeah, there was no doubt in my mind that Henderson was going to be able to beat this kid. It wasn't going to happen.
In a professional regular season match, the winner is declared after the best of three, with each round lasting 20 minutes and both players getting one timeout per round. Eddie won the first two rounds in under 10 minutes total.
It might have been one of the proudest moments of my whole life. Definitely my proudest moment as a coach. Before he walked out of the tunnel for the match, he asked me, "Please, coach, if I have the opportunity, can I try the fork?" And I told him, if you really think that you're ready, then go for it. He assured me he was. It was the greatest knockout win I've ever seen. It was better than me. He turns to the fans, and he goes,
Tic-tac, boom! Still to this day, hands down, the win I'm most proud of. Because it let people know that I was the new sheriff in town.
Of course, I was upset at the time, because I never had a loss that bad. So, I vowed to make sure that by the next time we faced off, I knew how to counter the fork. Couldn't figure it out, though. And even when I thought I did, he'd do something else unstoppable. I hated that guy.
Davis and Henderson became the new rivalry, the modern Johnson and Bird, except it was really a rivalry because during that whole season, Davis won every match against Henderson, and every match that whole year for that matter, he tore his opponents apart. After taking the title belt from Henderson, he was on the top of the world.
The 2002 to 2003 season was record-breaking for Eddie, the league, and the sport. No rookie has ever done what Eddie did in that year. He followed the season with 6 of the most dominant seasons in tic-tac-toe history with 5 straight titles. Greatest stretch of wins in the league's history by far. But going to his 7th season, things weren't looking too good for him.
During the off-season after the 6th consecutive championship win, I started to receive some offers, not brand deals or endorsements, but for underground gambling. I would receive multiple offers a day from various members of different crime organizations to start throwing matches, but in the end we mostly turned them down for the next season until we got to the championship. That's when some big deals started rolling in, but there was one in particular that was unlike any other.
How much was it?
$269 million.
That was a rough day. Ronnie didn't agree with Clarence and I taking the $269 million to throw the championship.
I was immediately against it. It really upset me. I went through all of this during my career. The secrets, the involvements of the mafia, the betting, the money, the nonsense, all this gets caught up in the game and it gets really, really scary. And I didn't want Ed going through the same thing that I went through. But either way, my voice just was not being heard anymore. You know, Eddie thought he had already reached the top, mastered all the moves, finished his training. At the end of the day, in his eyes, I was nothing more than moral support. So when I said something he didn't like, he just tuned me out.
You know, there was some yelling, pretty bad and long argument. That was when he walked out. The last time I spoke to him. I'm sorry. I need a break.
I don't like to argue or get in fights, but accepting that money just was not a good idea. I said it from the very beginning. And so I decided in that moment that I no longer wanted to associate with them, with Eddie and Clarence, so I walked out.
I was excited to meet him in the finals for that year, for another rematch. But as soon as I saw that Ronnie wasn't standing next to him walking out of the tunnel, I knew something was off.
I think when Ronnie didn't walk out with Eddie, we were all really confused. As much as they were just coach and athlete, they were like best friends. So when he wasn't there, no one really knew what was going on.
As much as I was looking forward to having a big stack of cash in my pockets, I wasn't in the right mindset anyways that night. Because Ronnie wasn't there. I probably would have lost if he wasn't there and I didn't take the deal. I needed him there.
He obviously was throwing the match. I could tell. No fork, no techniques. You know how I knew for sure? I won. I shouldn't have won. It's the award I got for beating a legend. But it didn't count, because I shouldn't have won. He was going to win his 7th straight title, and probably more if he didn't take the money and throw that match.
People started getting suspicious because, Eddie shouldn't have lost that match. Started as conspiracies, but, FBI investigation, all that happened, and then boom, truth came out.
I was undercover inside the Rigatoni crime family, and I noticed a particularly large payout made to Eddie's agent. I then learned he was being paid to throw the championship match, which is a federal offense, punishable by fine or imprisonment up to 5 years.
When the news broke, the news community stood still. This was absolutely shocking. No one could have predicted this.
Being taken to court was not easy for Eddie, especially after Ronnie left. He was really stressed and lonely. It was just a hard time. He knew he messed up. I tried to be there for him, but it just wasn't the same, and I saw it.
Of course I did the wrong thing. But if you were offered $269 million and the opportunity to be set for the rest of your life, then what would you have done?
I hated seeing Ed go through that. I loved the kid, but in the end, he got what he deserved. He knew the consequences all along, and he paid the price for his actions.
Everyone was waiting to hear me speak on the issue, to hear what we were going to do. I mean, what else could we do besides drop him from his contract and suspend him indefinitely? I didn't want to. I felt bad because we had a good relationship. I knew he was a good kid, but I had no other choice. It hurt me and the Tic Tac Toe community. Nothing felt the same after that for a while. It was kind of like the third time Michael Jordan announced his retirement. Put everyone in a state of shock to see a great have to walk away like that. It's awful. But again, I had no other choice.
It broke my heart. I had a great career. I wanted to keep playing. No one could beat me. I was going to be the best ever. Tic Tac Toe was my life. And I threw it away.
Well, since the news story broke 10 years ago today, looking back on it, do you say to yourself, I wish I could go back and change it?
No, never. I was a kid in my mid-20s. I saw that number in that meeting and thought, I'm set for the rest of my life. That I could buy the pink Volkswagen Beetle that I've always wanted. So looking back on it now, do I think I messed up? Of course. Do I wish I didn't go and screw it up? Of course. But if I had the opportunity to go back and have a do-over, no. I don't think I would. I now realize and acknowledge the mistakes that I made, and hopefully my story, now that it's out there, again, will inspire many athletes across the world to not make the same mistakes that I did. I had the opportunity to be the greatest of all time, to have the greatest career of all time, but I threw it out the window for some money. You know, sometimes you forget that when you make it big, you forget the love you actually have for the sport and why you got into it in the first place. I love Tic Tac Toe. I did. I still do. It is my life. Still. And it always will be. Tic tac boom.